So, networks that work. Specifically, we're going to be looking at, well, first I'm going to deal with any kind of fears of networking that you might have, because, I know that, it sometimes feels a bit daunting, the whole terminology networking. But I believe that everybody can network effectively. I think introverts can network equally well, and sometimes, if not better than extroverts, in as much as they can sometimes be better listeners, which is very important in relationship building. And I think a lot of this fear of networking is really to do with a misconception of what networking actually is. So we'll deal with that first. We'll look at what I think building a good, strong professional network actually is. Then we'll look at how you can make sure that you're getting the right messages to come across about you during your job search. And then the bulk of the session today, we're going to really, after we've done that kind of background stuff, I'm going to provide you with a strategy for how to best approach networking in a job search, so it doesn't feel daunting and you're not moving forward without a direction. So, and what I refer to this as a 3-tiered networking framework for job seekers. And we're going to cover the first 2 phases of this framework in detail today. The third one we'll cover next week when we're talking about the post-academic job search, and we're looking at how to get jobs out there in industry, because that's what the tier 3 networking is all about. It's all about identifying jobs. And as always, we'll take questions as we go through, and we'll see how much time we have for extended questions at the end. So first up today, let's look at some of those things that might stop people from networking effectively, either before they even get started, or leads them to give up too early before they get into a position where they can start generating results through their networking in a job search. And this can be a critical hurdle for us transitioning academics, I think. So let's start off with dispelling some myths about networking. And what I want you to do is think about that term professional networking, and then ask yourself, do any of the following words come up in your brain when you think about the term professional networking? So these are the words: overselling, dressing to impress, asserting superiority, pitching, something that extroverts do, narcissism, self-promotion, personal branding, working the room, smooth operators, desperate begging, or tacky. Okay, so I think, I certainly thought when I was thinking about networking, particularly from being in an academic situation and thinking about networking outside in the commercial sector, where I thought people had a better understanding of commercial acumen, and some people were very good at sales, I kind of had the impression when I was going into my transition that I might be having to do some of these things, right? Dressing to impress and going to networking events and overselling myself and having a pitch. And I think, that framework is wrong to a large degree. And, I guess what really turned it around for me was that I realized that, networking in its simplest form is literally just, connecting with people and talking to them. For example, if I needed a plumber or a good mechanic, I simply asked around, who knew a good mechanic, and can they give me the phone number? And when I started in a new department, academic department, I used to seek out a peer group who I could relate to, right, and socialize with. And this is all networking, right? This is all relationship building. So I started to ask myself, why was I thinking about professional networking in this kind of negative way, right? Why should I be thinking about it any differently? Why wasn't I thinking about it in the same way as I build friendships and a peer group around me? So I came up with kind of a new outlook on this networking, and its most simplest form, I thought about it as just talking to people. And moreover, over time, I've learned that to get noticed by people, you don't need to oversell. In fact, I think that's very off-putting if you are doing that. So what it's actually really about is authentic communicating and essentially talking to interesting people. And I think even if you're naturally quiet, talking to people can sound daunting, but it really doesn't need to be, because I believe everybody can network in their own style and be very effective. And it's much more productive to be authentic in your style. And we're going to look at that today. Okay, we're going to look at how to network effectively and how to do this well. And so, a lot of this is about going into, a conversation with somebody and asking yourself, what can I learn here? You can learn something from everybody. So if you frame it in your mind that networking is simply about talking to interesting people, learning something new, it suddenly becomes an activity that you want to do and you enjoy doing rather than, dreading to do, right? So that's where we want to be in our mindset. And it's an important reminder, and this is, I think, very important to people transitioning from academia, is that it's not a weakness to ask people for help, right? It's not a weakness to reach out to people and say, I want to learn more about what you do. And you're definitely not bothering people. Particularly if you reach out to other people who've made that transition, you'll be pleasantly surprised how many people want to help you, because they know they've been in that position, and they want to, pay it forward as well, their expertise. So I'd like you to try, and if you are having the same doubts that I had when I was making my transition, I want you to start thinking about, rejigging your mindset towards networking and what it actually is all about. Another really important thing is the benefits far, far, far outweigh any risks that you have with networking. Why essentially do we want to network for our careers? Because it is going to take a little bit of time investment after all. And it is because these benefits really, really do outweigh the risks. I mean, if you think about an academic career, okay, you need to network in that as well. Think about the top researchers, the top 1 or 2 researchers in your research field. Who are those names that pop into your mind, right? Because I would bet my life's worth that every single one of those people that you're thinking about is a seasoned networker. And here's why I think that: because they will have to network with funders, they will network with editors at top journals, and they will also network with members of university leadership teams. Okay, they'll network for faculty positions at top institutions. They'll learn about those before they're advertised. They'll know about the internal promotions committees, who's on them, and what they need to do to get those promotions. This is what professors do, basically, outside of going to conferences and talking about their work and making sure that their team is, operating and generating results. This is the other side of what a professor does. They are amazing networkers, the people at the top of their game in academia. So even if you stay in academia, what I'm telling you is you're going to have to network, okay, if you want to stay there and be successful. But, I digress, because what we want to talk about is building a non-academic network. Okay, so building a non-academic network to get us a job outside of academia, essentially, is the aim of what we're doing. And so, when we're looking to move out of academia, the aim of the networking is, of course, different, and yet it's incredibly powerful for your post-academic job search. And I'm going to list some of the benefits now, okay? The first is that you're going to understand your value on that non-academic job market more, and you're going to understand how to present yourself, right, with that narrative in mind, okay? Because when you talk to people who are working outside, you're automatically going to understand, what they're using, what skills they're using, what they bring to the non-academic job market, and you can figure yourself whether you can do that as well. Picture yourself in their position doing that job, and you'll understand, the skills that you're bringing across to that sector. You're going to find non-academic positions, okay? You're going to uncover that that hidden job market that we spoke about at the beginning. That's incredibly important. Sorry, I just see there's a note there in the chat. How do we approach people? That's a question from Vanessa. Okay, so I'm going to leave that question for now, Vanessa, because we're going to get onto that, okay, how to approach people. That's what we're going to deal with in the next, coming slides. And it's quite an important thing. It's what the 3-tiered networking framework is really all about, because it builds you up sequentially so that you're speaking to the right people at the right time. Because I think a lot of academics make the mistake of feeling like they need to network and then reaching out to people, usually like hiring managers and HR and recruiters, very early on in the process. And that's not a very strategic approach to networking, because it means you're reaching out to those who can forward your agenda way, way too early before you're ready and you sound credible. So that's what the 3-tiered networking system's all about, framework's all about, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next few slides. So we'll deep dive on that today, Vanessa, don't worry. Okay, so just getting back again to these advantages then. So I said uncovering the hidden job market. You'll identify industry-specific trends. This is important again, because you're going to increase your credibility as a candidate. If you can go into interviews and you're You have knowledge, industry specific knowledge about what's happening in that industry. You can reiterate that in the interviews. You'll enter an industry better connected. So you'll already have, if you start your first job, you'll already know people within that industry, and hopefully you can build on those relationships going further. In fact, somebody that I spoke to, I did an informational interview recently. I just helped her out because we were looking for writers at Novartis, and I put her name forward for a job, and she started a few weeks ago. And these kinds of interactions and reciprocal relationship building between your network, between the contacts in your network, will go forward into your new career as you start your new career in industry. So, entering an industry better connected is a super bonus from building or taking the time to build a non-academic network. You'll understand the language of that different work. This is really important because you need to build that into your applications to make them stand out against other candidates. You'll understand what success looks like outside of academia. Okay, talking to people who are doing well and are moving on in their careers within industry. You'll understand what skills they needed to get there, how they needed to move forward. So that's obviously quite an important thing as well. And you'll increase your visibility on the non-academic job market too. And we've spoken about that before. So I've just got another question. So Sue says, over the past year, I have started using LinkedIn to find people who are a few steps ahead of me and write them personalized invite telling them who I am, why I'm connecting with them, and how I found their profile. I was referred to some of them by someone. 8 out of 10 people do not accept those personalized invitations. That really seemed to help, and I keep those conversations active every page. Brilliant. So you've already started then, Suha, on building your non-academic network, and keep going with that, because that's exactly the right approach you should be using. Fantastic. Okay. So there are all the advantages. I hope you can see they're quite numerous. So what are some of the risks of networking? I've just listed these at the bottom. So obviously it's going to take a bit of time investment, right? You've got to invest a bit of time into doing this. And hopefully today I'm explaining why I think you should do this and make this time investment. I don't think you need to be spending any more than maximum an hour a week. Now, obviously, if you're right in the throes of, looking for job, applying for jobs, and maybe, your academic contract has finished, you maybe want to be plowing a bit more time into this. But you can tick this kind of work alongside the research that you're doing right now, and it shouldn't interfere, right? We've all got a spare hour a week. I have a lot of work on at the minute, but I still make sure that I make time for networking within, my busy working week. You may experience a bit of discomfort. Sometimes conversations don't work out, right? We don't gel with everyone. That's just normal. Sometimes, especially when there are live events or we're allowed to go to live events, you might go to a networking event, there might be a circle of people, and you feel a bit of discomfort, maybe trying to break into that circle and introduce yourself. All you've got to do is walk up, introduce yourself, excuse yourself if someone was talking, and then just say to them again, please continue. You just need to just push yourself forward a little bit. Now, I'm not saying you have to be, operating outside of your comfort zone completely, but there are times with networking where you might feel a little bit of discomfort from time to time, but it shouldn't be much. It shouldn't be excruciating. Getting ghosted. So Suha mentioned this as well, right? So, sometimes people don't reply to you, particularly when you're reaching out on LinkedIn. And this is normal. People are busy. Just don't take it personally. And don't let it put you off, right? Just keep plowing on. Just keep trying to reach out to people. And eventually people will get back to you. You will generate some conversations. Sometimes people, before they even get started, think it won't work for some of the reasons already said, or sometimes they get started and it doesn't work out for them. They have one or two tricky conversations, or they reach out to these decision makers far too early and then decide that it's not working for them, so they stop. And this is really because there's a lack of agenda, right? And there's a lack of, what they want out of each conversation that they're going into. And they're just kind of moving around randomly, reaching out to people. So we're going to put a strategy in place today specifically focused at transitioning into industry for networking. So you won't have this issue. And then the other one that I've heard people say is that they've run out of contacts. They've got nobody else to speak to. And that really ought not happen, right, when you've got LinkedIn. So there's absolutely no reason you should run out of contacts. So all in all, really, the only risks that you've got of networking is a bit of time investment, the potential that you might feel a bit of discomfort if you don't hear back from people or you have the odd awkward conversation. And that's really it. So the other things, all the benefits you get from it, how you can build your credibility, find those jobs, build a network that can help you in your future career. Those are incredibly powerful things that, I think the benefits far, far outweigh the risks of just a bit of time investment and maybe the odd uncomfortable conversation. Okay, so that said, before we get started, I do want to suggest that there are a few ground rules that I think are really good to just make sure you obey to if you want to get the most out of your networking. And I've listed these here. So the first is, value those you reach out to, and specifically in terms of time. Okay, so remember, people are very busy. And if they say to you, if you pencil in, say, a 15, 20-minute conversation with someone, make sure it doesn't go over those 20 minutes. Okay, so when you get to those 20 minutes, say, look, I realize we're on time. If you want to continue, we can, but, I'm happy. I think, we should finish this conversation at this point if you need to go. And maybe the conversation will continue okay, or maybe they'll say, we can pick it up another time or whatever, or take it offline. But always respect that time window, because, as I said, people are very busy. The time is their most precious commodity. And it's very important to make sure that we stick to that when we're reaching out to people for help. Networking is not about elitism, okay? It's not about being in an elite club of self-promoters or anything like that. As I said at the beginning, it's about talking to interesting people. It's about learning from them. And this will help people remember you, in a positive light. And it's basically all the things you do when you form any relationship. So, don't go into it thinking, this is for elite people and, maybe I don't fit in there, because you'll just go into it with the wrong mind frame. It's not about that at all. We spoke about that at length in the beginning. This is an important one, no big asks. And I've got in brackets there, at least at first, because the secret to getting engagement with others is asking for things that require minimal effort on their part, okay, the part of the people that you're trying to make the connection to. So something like sending a resume up front, or asking for a referral, or requesting an introduction to a hiring manager at that point. These are all big asks, okay? They're asking people for a large commitment of time to go away and read your resume, or they're asking for, putting their reputation on the line if they're asking for a referral or requesting an introduction to a hiring manager at that point. What you need to do is work on nurturing that relationship to a point where this level of help can be offered. And this is why it takes a little bit of time to get the results that you want from networking. It takes a little bit of investment time up front. But as I said, it's well worth doing and putting that effort in. Understand what you want out of each conversation and keep it focused. Okay, when you're focused, when you approach people, keeping it simple and knowing, what that one thing is you want out of each conversation as you go into it is very important, I think, because it could be something simple like, I just want to learn more about their job, or I want to practice, coming across authentically, or I want to know if there's any job, opportunities at their company. At different stages in the networking process, in the 3-tier framework that I'm going to teach you, your objective to that conversation may vary. Okay, but knowing before you go into the conversation what that objective is, what's that one thing of information you want, is important. It'll keep you focused and it'll keep the conversation on track to where you need it to go. Approaching people at the right time. I've touched on this already. It's important to be approaching decision makers. So like I said, hiring managers, HR people, not to be approaching them too early, because I think this is an all common mistake amongst transitioning academics. These decision makers are really the busiest people in the workplace, right? Even a really well-crafted email to these people out of the blue will often be ignored. So there is a better strategy, a better way to approach these people. And approaching them at the right time is what you need to think about. That's what the 3-tier framework is all about, and it's what we're going to learn about today. And then you've got to think about, nurturing your network as well. Okay, so reach out to everyone in your network once in a while. Okay, so it doesn't need to be much. You can comment on a LinkedIn post. You can just like them. You can acknowledge milestones if you see they got a promotion or they've published an article, or even if it's just their birthday. Just acknowledge them. You may find something that you want to share with them that's useful from a conversation you've had with them. All these things help to, over time, build a genuine relationship, and that's what we're really looking for. Adding value, building that relationship. Going forward as you build your non-academic network. And then lastly, I've touched on this already. Remember, not all conversations and contacts work out. That's okay. Happens to the best of us. At networking, we're going to speak to people that we just don't quite gel to. The important thing is don't let it knock you off track, right? Just keep going. Okay, so those are the 7 key things that I think you should stick to when you come into the frame of thinking about networking and moving forward. Okay, so there's just some kind of very basic things about, hopefully, introducing you to networking and why you should do it. There were a couple of questions as we went along. Are there any more at this point that anybody would like to touch on before we get into the next section? No, I think we're all good.
Vicky, can I ask something, please?
Sure. Hi. Oh, Alex. Yeah. Is that Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my volume up.
Isn't great.
Okay. I can hear you now perfectly well.
So the question was, when you say about certain people are too early to go for,
yeah.
It's quite a specific question. I get a few messages on LinkedIn from recruiters, often with a role that they have and they think it might match me. And it's often an issue of just location that I turn it down because it's not based in Dublin. But is following up about something else with them, is that too early as well, or should I be trying to use that? And if so, is it appropriate to ask them if they have anything else in Dublin, basically?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly fine because they initiated the contact, right? So, I think whatever your LinkedIn profile says or is doing a good job, right, to attract those people. So I think in that instance, you're perfectly fine. Can I ask, are they asking about jobs in other geographical locations, but are jobs that you would be genuinely interested in if they were in Dublin?
Yeah. So some of them are just in other counties in Ireland. But
okay.
Yeah.
I don't think you have any problem there because they've already reached out to you. So I don't think that's an issue. What I would say is that, when they reach out to you, do you feel like they're obviously reaching out to you because they think you've got the right skills, right? So they think, you're a credible candidate already. Do you feel that you have the right skills and you would be ready to get, your resume together and a cover letter sent out pretty quickly to them?
There has been one or two where I like the look of it and think the fit is quite good, but it's literally just a question of location. I'm quite set on staying in Dublin for personal lifestyle reasons.
Yeah, no, I don't think you have any problem, Alex. I think they've already reached out to you, and that's absolutely fantastic. So yes, I know I'm saying, don't reach out too early, but if they're already reaching out to you, it's not too early, is it? So
yes. Okay, so it's appropriate in that case.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Definitely, especially, because obviously they feel that you're credible. They feel from what they're reading on your LinkedIn profile that you've got the right skill set. So it's just about bringing, that skill set to the fore in your resume, basically. So I'm sure you could get that together for them. Absolutely. Okay, I don't think that's a problem. Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions at this point? And if not, we'll move on to messaging.
I have a question.
Hi, Polynicus. How are you?
Fine. What is exactly the decision maker? Who is exactly the decision maker, and what is the contact that you say that you shouldn't make too early?
Yeah, so in my definition, a decision maker is anybody who could move your agenda forward in terms of finding a job. So that is anybody who has influence in either making a decision themselves or influencing somebody who would make a decision. Okay, so by that definition, we're talking about hiring managers, we're talking about HR personnel within companies, and we're also potentially talking about recruiters, right? Recruiters are hired by companies to find people, but they have huge influence because they tend to be the first screening round. So they have huge influence about who's put forward to their clients. So those are really the key decision makers, those people. Could also be somebody who's not hiring directly, but has a strong reputation within that company and their opinion is highly valued as well. It could be somebody like that. But most often we're talking about the hiring managers directly. We're talking about the HR department. We're talking about recruiters. So those are the people that I think you can, if you reach out to them too early, if you reach out to them at the point where you're not sure what career you want, you haven't really got enough background information to sound credible, I think you can unfortunately, ruin an opportunity there. Because if you've just done a bit more work up front, and we'll talk about what I think that work should be, in a few weeks' time when you spoke to those people, you're going to come across a lot more credible, right? And then, you haven't wasted that opportunity by speaking to them weeks before and not sounding like somebody credible. Because at the minute you speak to them, they're already asking themselves, are they going to be useful for my team? Are they going to fit in? And you want to be at a point where you're speaking to them, ready to show that you are, that credible candidate and that you do want that job. You don't want to be going to them saying, what kind of jobs are available here? And what do those jobs entail? You want to be talking to those people at the point where you're offering your skills up front. Okay, so I would be cautious about talking to those people too early in a job search. I really would. And I think a lot of people go into networking thinking they've got to talk to those people. Those are the people that are going to get them the jobs, right? So I think a lot of people step into that mindset that they've got to speak to those people as early as possible. But I think that is quite a basic mistake, because you can waste that opportunity to talk to those people who might well have a job, in the pipeline in a few months' time opening up, if you talk to them before you sound like a credible candidate.
Thanks.
And anyway, we'll talk through what I think, the framework will show what the stages I think you need to do in your networking to get to that point to talk to them. Okay. Does that answer your question, Polynikas? I know I waffled on a bit then.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great.
I was actually, to be more precise, I was actually thinking of, because it turned out that through acquaintances, I knew people that were really high up in scale in big pharmaceutical companies. And I was wondering how this could help me, because it was like too high up.
Right.
In terms of they wouldn't take responsibility of. So is this people that you can just take information from, or are there people who can forward your CV to HR departments or something?
Yeah, I think, if you've got people really, when we're saying really high up, are you talking like
CEOs?
CEO?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty high. Yeah, okay. So, those people are, of course, people of influence, right? They are decision makers. They're exactly a tier 3 contacts. So, I would be wanting to talk to them when I feel like I have a good amount of background information about their company, about the types of people who work in their company and the jobs they have. I personally wouldn't want to be talking to them at the point where I was still deciding what I wanted to do. My approach there would be, I would try to, now, if you've been referred to them directly and they're expecting a call from you, that's different, because you're going to have to, quickly step up and take that call and not waste that opportunity. But if you've got a bit of time and you've just been given a name to reach out to at some point in the future, you could take a bit of time to then talk to people either in their company or similar companies about the jobs that they do, get that background research you need, and then reach out to whoever it was who gave you that name, because I think you said, those names came about through somebody else, and ask for a warm referral, possibly to that person and see how that goes. That's the approach I would take, but it's going to depend a little bit on the circumstances in that particular example.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. There's another question in the chat. Just one second. Vanessa had the same. Okay, so Vanessa, have you had the same issue where you, well, it's not an issue, it's actually a really good thing, where you've got a, you know, a decision maker that you've been given a name of or introduced to?
Yeah, so I actually, there's this CEO of a company that I connected via LinkedIn already, I think 2 years ago. And he actually asked me about some data. So, and I've been following him and his company since then. And they don't have any open position, but in their webpage, they, you know, they welcome applications. So I was wondering if I could contact him directly and ask, look, this is something that I would like for my future or like be doing. And he already knows a bit my background. If then he could, you know, if I can ask him what kind of positions do you have, what are you looking, how are you planning to expand your company, to see if there would be a job, a role that would fit me, or that I would fit the role that they could potentially be looking for in the future. So
yeah, well, I mean, that sounds perfect, because you've already kind of over time nurtured that relationship, right? You've kept that contact going, so you already have them. I would say, you know, absolutely go for it. And we will talk about sending out speculative letters next week as well. Doing that kind of, you know, what we should write when we want to ask, is there a job going? And your example is perfect, because those letters are perfect when you have a specific technical skill set that you think a company's after, you know, after, or an employer's looking for. So that would be a great example where, yes, you should definitely put out a speculative letter. But I would say, you know, going into that conversation, you want to be as best prepared again as you possibly can be. And, you know, maybe if there is a chance to look around on LinkedIn, perhaps there's the odd person who's working in that company doing kind of similar roles, or having the technical skills that you have, or had a similar background to you. Maybe that would be a good person to reach out to initially as well, right? And maybe you could even strike up a conversation with them before. I don't know. It can be a tricky thing to find, and you might not manage, but I think it's worth a go in that situation. And then when you go into the conversation with the CEO, because hopefully, you know, if you've built up that relationship, they'd be very open to that. Then you might be able to say, you know, I've already spoken to so-and-so person, but, you know, what other jobs are there as well where, you know, my skill set would be useful? And you can open up the conversation that way, but it would give you a bit more background information as well to go into that conversation with. But I think you've certainly done a lot of the legwork in building that relationship anyway. So that's definitely a tier 3 contact that you already have in your network, which is great. So you can definitely leverage that.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Right. Some of you have made really good progress with this already, I can see. So let's get on. Let's move on and talk about messaging, because we still have a fair bit to cover today. So, you know, getting the right messages across when we're networking is important, right? Because you want to get front of mind of people when they're thinking about potential candidates. So here's a question that I want you to ponder for just like 30 seconds or a minute. There's no need to share because it's quite a personal one. But when your name comes up in a conversation when you're not around, what do you think people say about you? So just have a think about that. What do you think people say about you when you're not around and that your name comes up? Has everybody got an answer in their head? Is there anybody still thinking? I'll take silence to mean everybody's come up with something. So let me guess what I think everybody's answer is. is it something about your personality? Were you thinking, oh, I think people would say that I'm nice, or I'm easygoing, or I'm helpful, or I'm positive? Something about your character. Did anybody think of anything else? Let's just have a look. There's some discussion in the chat here in case anybody's popped it in the chat. Hopefully good things. Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Did anybody think of something that wasn't about their character? Okay, I'm taking silence to mean that most people have that kind of, thing about character. So, either you're easygoing or you're helpful or you're a good team player, something like that. And here's the really interesting thing, because I think it's possible your character would be mentioned in a conversation about you, but if it would be, I think it's usually just an add-on. Okay, oh, something else in the chat here. What's in the chat? Oh, Dania says, yes, about my skills. Brilliant. Yes, I agree with you, Dania. So that's what I was just about to say, because, I think a lot of the time we do think it's about character, but mostly when you're brought up in a conversation, it's because you have something to offer other people, okay, which is more likely, it's more likely that people are going to say, oh, I've met so-and-so and that they do this, right? This is their background. So think about these two phrases. Which is more likely for you to hear about somebody talking about a passing acquaintance? So somebody came to you and said, I've just met this new person in the department who seems really nice. That's not a common thing I think people would say. Usually they say something like, I just met this new person in the department who's working on sickle cell anemia, and they seem very nice, right? They would usually say what their expertise is, or which lab they're in, or what they're doing. They would usually talk about those kind of skills and expertise first. And the majority of conversations you're associated to, in the majority of conversations, you're associated to the skills and expertise that you talk about often. And I think this is a really, really important thing to think about, because what it means is that, although it's difficult to control what people think about your personality, it's not difficult to control about what people think about the expertise that you offer. And it's a really important thing to remember that you have far more control over what people say about you when you're not around than you think. So this is the reason I'm telling you all this is important when we start thinking about messaging, because it's great news when you're job searching, because it means you have an opportunity to essentially provide bite-sized pieces of positive information that people will find useful and interesting. Okay. And, you are in control of that. And if you get your messaging right, people will remember that and they will talk about it. And remember that, if you're enthusiastic in the way that you deliver this information, that tends to open doors as well. So, as I said, this is a really, really key point. And what I want to talk about is how people tell you to kind of get that messaging across about your expertise and skills. Because often I think what you'll see is on the internet, there's a lot of gurus that basically say, you've got to get this positive messaging across in your job search. And what they'll tell you is you probably need a pitch. You might have heard the term elevator pitch, that short time it takes to get in an elevator and go up a few floors to deliver your pitch. So you need something that would tell people, within 10 to 30 seconds about all the things that you want to get across. And they'll usually say in that pitch, you need to have who you are, what you do, and often what you're after as well. And, I think while this sounds quite good and positive thing to do, and I think for some people it definitely does work, particularly people who are very comfortable with kind of, that kind of salesy approach in talking about themselves, I think the vast majority of us, I think a pitch can be a little bit detrimental to what we're trying to do in networking. And I think this for the following reasons, because I was told I needed a pitch and I just didn't think it worked out that well for me. And I think because when you actually write down exactly what you want to do, what you want to say, who you are, what you do, and what you're after, I think that creates a kind of a prescriptive language that you use that can come across as inauthentic. And that's what we're trying to avoid when we're building relationships and we're networking. We want to sound authentic, as I said. And I think it can also run the problem of you trying to say too many important things in a very brief conversation, where you're trying to say what you do and all the skills you have, and you try to bring too much to the fore, and then it's just overkill, because part of this is getting people to remember you, right? And if you try to load too much onto them, they won't remember anything. Okay, so that's a key thing as well, that we want to just give them, as I said, some bite-sized positive pieces of information that they can handle. And I think when people get pitched at as well, you know, it can often sound like a bit of a sales pitch, and it can sometimes have the opposite effect and cut a conversation dead, because people don't want to be pitched at necessarily. They want to have a genuine conversation and talk. So I think that's another issue. And as I said, the whole term pitching is really indicative of selling rather than conversation, which I think is what we're aiming for when we're networking. We're aiming really to have that conversation, build that relationship, and really learn new things from people, okay? And have an authentic conversation, as I said. So I personally would say ditch the pitch. Don't try to produce something that's too prescriptive, and that you try to deliver flawlessly, because I think it can sometimes be counteractive on what we're trying to achieve. And I think it puts a bit of pressure on you as well, you know, to commit this pitch to memory. I think it can be a really tough thing to do. So what do I think works instead? And what I'm going to hit on here is this power of 3. Okay, so if we think about 3 in communication, it really is a magic number. So think about kind of all the fairy tales and, you know, political messages and stories in religion and even jokes, right? 3 often is in all these stories, right? It's a number that's used, and it's a number that's used because we can remember it. If we think about the 3-act formula in storytelling, if any of you are familiar with kind of screenwriting or dramas or plays, or, you know, the arts generally, a lot of really, really good stories use this 3-act formula. And that formula is like the setup, the conflict, and the resolution. And the reason screenwriters use this often, or people who write playwrights, they use it because we remember it. Okay, so we remember the part of the play which was setting it up, we remember the conflict, and we remember the resolution. You know, there's lots of examples. Star Wars, if any of you like sci-fi, Star Wars is a classic example that follows this 3-act formula storytelling of, you know, Luke, the farm boy who lived on a planet and then met a master and went off and saved a princess. And then in the conflict, that's the setup. And then in the conflict part, you know, he had to fight the enemy, but his master died, right? Fighting his nemesis, Darth Vader. That's the conflict part, where you think everything's lost. And then it moves into the resolution, where Luke, the farm boy, basically has to step up, step into the shoes of his master and defeat the enemy and restore peace to the galaxy. Right? That's the resolution of the story. It's probably, you know, one of the most famous Hollywood stories out there. And the reason it works is people remember it because it follows this 3-act formula. And the reason we remember these things is because 3 is a simple pattern form, and neurologists know that the average working memory handles about 3 to 4 things maximum at once. So when we're talking to people with important messages, like we're going to be doing when we're networking, we're going to be doing in interviews as well, there's going to be 3 really key important pieces of information that we want to get across, that we want people to remember. Okay, so I term this something that you can go away and think about, a 3 short statement message. Okay, so I'm giving you here the 3 short statement message that I used during my transition to industry. And the 3 sort of short statement message I used was that I was a PI and I had this natural aptitude for scientific writing. I then would go on and say that I'm interested in a career as a professional medical writer because I want to go ahead and produce all these high quality deliverables that I know medical writers do. And I enjoyed taking this complex information and condensing it into simple messages. For those of you who remember what I spoke about last week, when I spoke about core strengths, I gave you my example of my core strengths. So 2 of those are in here. So that natural aptitude for scientific writing, effective scientific writing is one of my core strengths that I discovered during those exercises that I did. And that taking complex information and condensing it into simple messages was a second core strength. So I've embedded 2 of my core strengths into this simple message. And I used this message over and over again. I didn't always say it in this prescriptive way. I just knew that these 3 things were 3 things that I wanted to get across when I was talking to people. And I used them not only when I was networking, I used them in the interviews as well. And I know they work because when I started my first job, in the first week, people came up to me and said, "Oh, hi, you're Vicky. You're that PI who enjoyed scientific writing and wanted to get into being a medical writer." And I knew straight off that from that interview, they remembered those things. And when they offered me the job, they went to their team and people in the office and they spoke about me. And those are the things they said. So I knew I had influenced the conversation that people were having about me, when I wasn't there. So by fashioning something like this, a 3 short statement message with some key information about skills that you want to bring to the fore or core strengths that you want to bring to the fore, you can really influence what people say about you. So I strongly, strongly recommend you have a go at doing this. That's why the exercises I gave you last week in writing those core strengths is very important. And what Vanessa, you brought up is going to be important here as well, because when you speak to different people, you might want to have a slightly different 3 short statement message when you're exploring those different career paths and things that you want to implant in people's minds when that conversation ends and when they're thinking about you afterwards. So to this end, what I'm going to send you later is a worksheet to try and help you think about building this 3 short statement message that you can use. And what you're going to do is basically, once you've finished your core strengths exercise, and I know some of you are still working on this, so do take your time. Then I want you to write those 3 core strengths down, or if you've got more like Vanessa, write them all down or print off 2 sheets and do it for the different careers that you're looking at. Write down your core strengths, then summarize your career history in 1 brief line. So mine is, I'm an ex-PI, I turned medical writer in the pharma industry. I still use that phrase sometimes when people say, who are you? What do you do? Where do you come from? So just very briefly, and then write down what you want people to say when they recommend you. Okay, so think about the things that you would like to be recommended for, right? If you were in an interview, what would you want people to remember about you, and what would they want you to recommend to their colleagues of why you should be hired? And then also have to think about what makes you a little bit different. Okay, so for me, I have a lot of oncology experience, and I want to bring that to the fore because I work in the oncology department in Novartis. So that's something I tend to say to people every now and again. I say I have a lot of oncology experience. And I want people to also remember that I've already had leadership experience and I've run successful teams. But you can put anything in here that you want. It could even be a hobby, right? Something that makes you memorable, stick out. Maybe you've climbed up Everest, I don't know, but what makes you stand out and a little bit different to everybody else? Because those are the things that are going to help with people remembering you as well. And then think about your top 3 career paths. Okay, I've got 3 in here that I potentially might explore in the future, who knows? But number 1 is where I'm at the minute, roles within medical communication, but yours are all going to be different, right? And some of you have maybe even have more than 3, but try and narrow it down to 3 or less. And then when you get to the green box at the bottom, the 3 short statement message, I want you to have a think about fashioning that in a way that pulls out some of this key information in the worksheet. So the first statement is, what is your brief career history statement? So for me, I used to work as a PI, but I always had this natural aptitude for scientific writing. Okay, so I still say that I have this enjoyment and aptitude for scientific writing because I want people to know about that. I work in the medical communications industry, so that's still in my 3 short statement message. And then the second statement, I want you to think about the career path you're looking to explore and obtain a job in when you're thinking about talking to people and networking within that area. And so write in that exactly which job you're interested in. So say, I'm interested in learning more about X role, whatever it is. And then state something you want to be remembered or recommended for. It could be something that makes you stand out, what makes you a bit different, merged with one of your core strengths. Or it could just be focused around one of your core strengths. What I want you to try and do is get 2 or 3 of your core strengths into the 3 short statement message. The 3 things you want to be remembered for when they think about you later after the conversation. And those core strengths are the things that are going to, you know, set you apart and get you into the job. Hopefully they're around the skills that the people are using in those jobs. Okay, so I hope that kind of reiterates what, you know, I think you can do to try and influence what people say about you when you're not around. And I think having these kind of 3 short statements in your mind helps you. They're not hard to remember, and it helps you, you know, pepper them into conversations as you work through your networking. Is that clear to everyone? Does anybody need me to reiterate anything, or is it confusing, or is it okay?
It's clear, I think.
Good. Okay. How are we doing for time? Oh, hang on, in the chat. Let's see. Okay, great. Okay, I'm glad that's clear. Right. Okay, so let's move forward then. So for the rest of today, we're really going to talk about this 3-tiered networking framework. This is the tool that I used, that I taught other people to use with great success, and I think it really, you know, will move your job search on tremendously. Okay, if you use it and you stick to it. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of what it is, I just want to bring up a couple of stumbling blocks that can hold people back from using the framework effectively. Okay, and the first is this idea of overanalyzing. Okay, so something that I think can get in the way of a really relaxed conversation is when you kind of beat yourself up after the conversation has happened. And I think we all have examples of where we've done this, where we thought we could have said things better. Maybe we felt we said something embarrassing, or we didn't get the right messaging across that we wanted to. And I think reflection can be really good, can be a really good learning experience for you to take away, you know, how to improve next time. But if you're mulling over the same dialogue that you had in a conversation more than, say, once or twice, you know, then it's time to move on, really, because, you know, you'll start to just worry and panic about the next conversations you have. And there's no need to, right? It's just an ongoing process. Don't worry about it too much. Don't overanalyze it. And I think the overanalysis can also be a problem, as I said, to apply to the future, because overthinking, you know, what you're going to say based on things that didn't work out before can make your words come across as clumsy. Okay, so the idea here is really to do a little bit of practice up front. That's what the framework is designed to do, which enables you to practice and then think less when you're in the conversations. This is built into the framework, so if you follow the framework, you won't have a problem with this. And the second stumbling block I think some people can face is by trying to be too self-focused. So going into the conversations thinking, I need to influence this person, I need them to remember me, you know, that can lead you into that trap of the whole sales pitch and, you know, just bombarding people with so much information that, you know, just hoping that some of that information will stick. It is just a dangerous place to be, because, you know, it likely won't, and it likely will put people off from wanting to talk to you again. Part of, you know, building successful relationships, and it's been shown time and time again that for people to like you, often it's important for them to be a strong participant within the conversation, really. Okay, so people like you more if they get to talk about themselves more. I mean, it's kind of ironic, really, and it's the irony of effective networking that conversations that project you and your agenda really are far more effective when they're focused on the other person. And so in this case, we're talking about, you know, transitioning to industry. So I think, you know, a lot of people miss this important point that, you know, if you're trying to project yourself and your agenda and get that job, you know, in industry, it's going to be far more effective when the conversation is focused on the other person than when it's focused on you. Okay, so we'll have a look at actually how to do this. Now, I mentioned this book last week, The Squiggly Career, and I said it was a useful book last week, but it's useful in thinking about networking, because what they say in there is there's actually 3 networks that are important to your professional development. The first one is your current role network. So these are people who help you succeed in your job right now, right? So these will be your supervisor, maybe collaborators, lab colleagues, those type of people, the people that help you achieve the research objectives that you're working on right now. Then your personal development network. Okay, so these are people that help you be your best. Could be a mentor, could be a family member, someone in your social circle who dishes out really good advice, right? Somebody who helps you grow and develop as a person. That's your personal development network. And then there's your future role network. These are the people that help you explore future career possibilities. Okay. And these are the people that we want to focus on when we're looking to transition to industry. We want to be building that future role network. Now, some contacts can be in more than one network. So take your supervisor, for example. They're obviously in your current role network. They're helping you, develop as a researcher. But they might also fall into your future role network, because they might come to you with potential postdoc jobs or another job in their lab or whatever it is. So they can fall into two, but that's really immaterial. Because when we're talking about networking for industry jobs, we're more specifically talking about building your future role network with industry professionals. Okay, and that's what the 3-tiered networking framework is designed to achieve. It's designed to build your future role network. Oh, sorry, I should have put these up. So these are just explaining who the contacts are. And like I said, with the 3-tiered framework, we're going to build the future role network. So what actually is this 3-tiered networking framework? So what it is, it's a framework or a process that will take you from your current zone of feeling comfortable with the networking you're doing right now in your academic area and building your academic network. And it will take you through a process to no limits, basically, enabling you to unlock all the advantages that I mentioned earlier in terms of accessing the hidden job market, increasing your visibility on the non-academic job market, etc. All those things that you want to achieve, from an effective future network role. Effective future network can bring to finding a role. And I guess, this probably sounds quite cheesy, but the thing is, it actually works. And I don't want you to confuse the idea that moving out of your comfort zone means that you have to operate outside of your comfort zone. Because if you are feeling very uncomfortable with the type of networking you're doing, it's going to be very difficult to achieve the things that I said you should in terms of, building relationships and sounding authentic and coming across, as a credible candidate. So you want to be operating within your comfort zone, but you might need to work at the edge of it sometimes, to push yourself forward and reach out to those tier 3 contacts eventually. That can be quite nerve-wracking, but I encourage you to be, brave to do those things and really step up and push yourself. So in terms of what it actually means, the 3 tiers refer to different levels of contacts that we need to reach out to build our future role network. And the key of the framework is that these people should really be approached sequentially. So the first tier is tier 1, and these are warm contacts, people you already know, okay, and people that you feel comfortable with to talk to and to try and practice, your networking skills. And, once you've built on this first step, then you can move on to the second stage, which is tier 2. And this is informational interviews. So you may have heard this term before. Lots of people talk about, doing informational interviews. I did an awful lot when I was transitioning out of academia. And the reason I did an awful lot was because, it really did work for me. It helped me uncover the jobs that I wanted to do, those that I didn't want to do. And as I said, it gave me the language that I needed to pepper into my applications and really make me sound credible when I made this step into industry. So it really is, a critical step in the whole networking process, the information interviewing process. And once you've gathered that information and done all that background research, then you're ready really to move on to the tier 3, these decision makers. And we spoke a bit about those because some of you already have those within your network, which is fantastic. And these are the people who can really forward your agenda. Okay, but today we're going to deep dive on the tier 1 and tier 2 contacts. Okay, and what that looks like. And we're going to leave tier 3 for next week because those are the guys that are going to get you jobs potentially. And what we're going to talk about next week is the post-academic job search and finding jobs. So we'll reserve those and talk about those next week. So as I said, we'll deep dive first on tier 1 and then on tier 2.
Excuse me, Vicky.
Yes, perfect. Questions.
Yeah, so I just have a question about the second part. If you get back to the previous slide, so yeah, informational interview. By that you mean, for example, I'm interested in a job. I found the people who are doing the same role in a company, and I just sent message to them and ask for a kind of a chat. But do they really have this time? Because as you mentioned, time is the most valuable thing, and I don't know. I mean, I've never done that, and I don't know how people react to this kind of message.
Right. Yes,
I mean,
some people.
Are they welcoming, or they can be like just ignore the message?
Yeah. So the thing is, yes, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what an information interview is, and I would really encourage you to do it. And you will get ghosted from time to time. There will definitely people who will, not get back to you or be too busy. Okay. I'm going to give you a few skills now with the tier 2 networking that I think could help you break in and break the ice a bit better. I would say with this, I had roughly around a 50% success rate, maybe a bit higher actually, when I started to get a little bit more specific about medical writing. And the reason is I really focused on people who'd made the transition from academia to industry when I was looking initially. So LinkedIn is a fantastic tool because it will give somebody, it'll give you the background of where somebody's come from. So you'll see if they've done a PhD, or you'll see if they've done, a master's degree or whatever. And that can give you a really good way in, because you can say, I see you made this transition. I want to do the same myself. And I'm interested in, whatever job it is that they're doing. Could we have a chat? And that way, automatically they know how difficult it is making that step out, and they know how blinded you can be within academia to the types of roles out there. And usually I would say a lot of PhDs are very happy to talk to other PhDs who are looking to make that transition. I think it's often about framing it in the right way. And for sure people are busy, and things are happening in their lives, and you might approach them at the wrong moment when they've just got too much on. I would say in that situation, what I tend to do is I would reach out maybe a few weeks later and just reiterate and just say, did you see my message? Would you be happy for a chat? If not, no worries. And then just see if they come back. If they don't, then leave it. There's plenty people out there on LinkedIn to find, plenty more fish in the sea, right, to build your network up with. So just don't worry about it. Just keep moving forward. Yes, time is of the essence. But if you go in there and you basically say, I'm looking for a 15-20 minute chat, I think most people would be happy to do that. Obviously now a lot of your networking is going to be happening online, because you can't really take someone for a coffee. But if there is the opportunity and you are in the same city as them, you could offer to take them for a coffee, and of course pay. I mean, I guess that might be a bit more of a time investment. It's also good for you if you can meet them face to face as well, because it makes you more memorable. Yeah. But generally, I wouldn't worry about it. I would just keep reaching out, give it a go, and see how you get on, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, to be honest.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I just see something in the chat here. Oh, Suha again. I'm actually involved in doing informational interviews now. More often than not, people are happy to talk about their jobs. Yeah, that was my experience as well. According to me, key to a successful informational interview is to do your research about them and go into the meeting with questions and listen to them. Yes, brilliant. So I'm already preaching to the converted, I think, because you're already experienced in this. That's exactly the right approach. So we will get onto that in a sec when I talk about tier 2 networking. But first, I just want to talk about tier 1. Are there any more questions at this point? What time is it? Do you know, I think we could take, if everybody would like, I think we could probably take a couple of minute break before I plow on, if anybody would like to grab a drink or anything. Would people like that, or should we just keep going? Any opinions?
Just a quick question.
Oh yeah, Harry's, hi.
Hi. So it's a basic thing that, okay, if I'm looking for a job with my qualification, I kind of tend to fit into some jobs. Is there some place where you can actually find like an organizational setup where it's like, okay, a scientist 3 is it's something that's not mine. What I'd be looking for is something higher. is there something, I mean, this is like about making contacts in the first place. Is there an organization set of maps which tell you like, okay, this is a person who has spent so many years in research or moved into a senior position? Because I don't want to be making contacts where I'll be looking at junior positions, right?
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you have an inroad and you can talk to somebody, it doesn't really matter at tier 2 at what level of seniority they are, as long as they're not hiring managers, I would say. So even if they're, you know, just, I guess, entry level, associate level, that they've just broken into the industry, they could teach you a lot about the hiring process. You know, you could learn a lot, and you could ask them equally, is there somebody, you know, with a bit more extensive experience in this specific area, whatever it is, your expertise, that I could talk to? And you might get a warm referral from them. So I wouldn't be put off talking to people who are in a junior level, or maybe even a technician. You know, you can still learn a lot from those people. So I wouldn't be put off by that. The tool I would use is LinkedIn, right? Because on LinkedIn, you can see directly where people have come from, because you can view their profile. Unless they've got it hidden, you can view their profile for free, right? So you can see basically where they've come from, where they've transitioned into, and what stage they're at. So that's a great tool to try and filter people out anyway. That's the tool I would definitely use. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that. I wouldn't be too worried about talking to more junior people as well, because they're going to give you insights and intel into that company that are going to, you know, you're going to learn from, and that are going to add to your knowledge bank, basically, when you're doing your applications and you're going for interviews. And they may even give you a warm referral to other people who are more experienced, and eventually maybe even, you know, to tier 3 contacts as well. So I really wouldn't worry too much about that, Harry's.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. It's okay, just that, I mean, I've read a couple of posts where people are like, okay, you need to make the right contacts. So I was kind of confused about the whole thing. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Okay, great. What's in the chat? I don't know if we can have a break now, people. We could probably have a couple of minute break. Oh, thank you, Suha. That's a lovely comment. Okay, would anybody like a break, or should we just plow on? Because I'm conscious that, you know, every week we sit here for 2 hours, and, you know, some of you might need a drink or need to go to the loo or something. But if it's silent and we're happy, you know, I'm happy to continue. Yeah. Well, let's should we go and plow on with the tier 1 networking, and I'll ask a question again about a break after we finish this section. Let's just look at the chat. Happy to keep going. Great. Okay, let's do that. Right, so tier 1 networking. Okay, this is about warm contacts. Okay, so who are these people and why do we want to talk to them? Right, so they're your existing contacts, people who are already in your network. I'm not talking about those CEOs some of you are referring to. I'm talking about people that, you know, are trusted friends or family members. Okay, people that you would feel comfortable with getting feedback from, really honest feedback. Ideally, they should be people, as I said, you feel comfortable talking to. You should trust them, and it'd be better if they had a non-academic background. Can be difficult to find some people sometimes, but it doesn't matter what their background is really. But ideally, if they're non-academics, it's better, because you'll learn to talk about, you know, you'll learn to talk to people outside of your academic network. And it'll help you broaden your horizons as well, and practice talking to people, you know, in all sorts of careers. I spoke, when I was doing this, I spoke to doctors, medics. I had no intention of going back to medical school and getting a doctorate, a clinical degree. I didn't want to practice medicine, but I spoke to those people just because I wanted to practice on them, and they were family friends. So, you know, you can speak to anybody, because what this is all about, tier 1 networking, is it's about practice. Okay, that's the name of the game, and it's really your first step in building a non-academic future role network. And I highlight this word practice, and there's 2 things you want to be practicing at this stage. And the first is authenticity. Okay, so I want you to try and experiment with different ways that you comfortably talk about your strengths. Okay, particularly, you know, thinking about practicing that 3 short statement message. You can practice small talk, right, without it sounding forced, and practice asking questions without sounding naive or intrusive in the way that you ask them. But you also want to practice active listening, right? We know how important, everybody knows how important active listening is in building relationships, right? We're told about it all the time, but it is incredibly important. It's why I said at the beginning, introverts can sometimes be better at networking than extroverts, because extroverts, very extreme extroverts, can find it quite difficult to practice this active listening. Introverts can tend to be naturally more attentive to active listening, and therefore can build more genuine relationships more easily. I'm being very general here across the board. It's not always true, okay, but just in general terms, if you're able to actively listen to people, it's going to do your relationship building and your network such a lot of good in the end, because you're going to learn from them. You're going to pick up the things that you need to in terms of, you know, learning what's out there in industry, learning all the things I'm telling you that you need to do in these kind of interviews with people and chats with people. But also it will help you, you know, build on that relationship in terms of you'll pick up information that you can then use later on, right, in a conversation, reaching back to them. Perhaps they'll mention that, you know, it's their I don't know, 25th wedding anniversary coming up, and you'll be able to just, you know, say, you know, when it comes up, congratulations, it's your 25th wedding anniversary. You know, if you're picking up this information, these are the really important things in building a genuine relationship that you want to be picking up on in conversation. So practice that active listening on these people as well, and learn how to ask genuinely curious questions to try and pull more information out of people, because that's what we want to do. We want to get people talking. What you're doing is here, you're practicing and preparing for going on to the informational interviews and the tier 2 networking. So how should we, you know, break the ice with these people? Well, this is quite easy, right? Because they're trusted friends and family. So all you have to say to them is, you know, I'm exploring career options outside of academia, and I'm practicing how best to reach out to people. Can I start with you by just asking you about the kind of work you do? So this is very casual. It's a very easy way in. And, you know, you don't really need a starter script to kick off these conversations, right? But what I want you to try and get out of it is, when the conversation turns to you, so when they've finished talking about the kind of work that they do, they'll say, so what are you interested in, right? That's at the point I want you to try and practice this 3 short statement message with them. Does it come across okay? Okay, did it roll off your tongue easily? Did it sound forced? Or did it sound, you know, very casual in the way you said it? And then I want you, this is why it needs to be a trusted person, because I want them to give you honest feedback and feel comfortable with giving you honest feedback. Ask them, how did that come across? Is there anything I can work on? Is there anything I can improve? You know, I ask them to be as honest as they possibly can with you, okay? And this can give you some really, really useful feedback that you can then use, pick up on, you know, and improve the way in which you say this 3 short statement message, and in the way in which you ask these questions. And I didn't spend long on this tier, I have to say. I spoke to maybe a handful of people at most. One of which was actually my sister, who gave me the most honest feedback of the lot, because she's my sister and she felt comfortable. And I actually went through a few iterations of that short statement message, and I played around with saying it in different ways that I thought came across a bit better. But I didn't spend long here, and I think that's probably, you know, be your experience as well. But the other thing you can try and get out of this is also asking them, is there anyone else in your network who you think could help me explore these career options further? You know, get used to asking that question. That's a question I think you should ask at every conversation you have when you're networking, because that's the conversation that opens the doors up to new people to talk to. It could be that you've got a family friend who, you know, has a contact who works in Google, right? Who's happy to talk to you about software development, and that's something you're interested in. You don't know who they know, right? So, you know, go into every conversation and try and get that question in at the end. They might not have anyone to introduce you to, they might not know anybody at that point, and that's okay if they don't. That's not a problem, right? We've got LinkedIn, so it's not an issue. But if they do, it's a bonus, and they might even say, look, I'll introduce you. That's a warm introduction, and that can be very useful, particularly when we get to tier 2. Okay, so what should you do after the conversation? Well, you should follow up with a very quick thank you note, highlighting a couple of things that you got out of the conversation. In this case, it'll probably be thank you very much for your feedback. I'm working on the way, this 3 short statement message. Thank you very much. And then, start at this point, putting these names down into just an Excel sheet will do. Who they are, what their occupation is, the date you last spoke, and any notes that came out of the conversation. And certainly, if they give you any names, right, future contacts, you want to list them as well. Okay, because you can follow up and say to them, oh, I'd be really interested in speaking to, I don't know, John Doe that you mentioned who works at Google. Okay, and then maybe they'll say, okay, I'll ping him on LinkedIn and put you two in touch. Okay, so this is very important, because when you get into the throes of the tier 2 network and getting on in beyond into the tier 3 networks, knowing who you've spoken to and knowing the date you last spoke is important, because you want to be building these relationships up, particularly if they're in an area you want to move into, in an industry that you're interested in working in. You want to keep a track of when you spoke to them, because you want to keep that continual, well, not continual, but ongoing dialogue flowing with them. Okay, so you want to be reaching out to them probably about once a month, when we're networking for looking for a job in industry. When you move into industry, if you want to keep those relationships going, I would say, you can move that on to once every 3 months. And that usually happens naturally anyway. You usually see them on LinkedIn, they make a comment or they write an article, and you just write whatever on there. So it should be more of a natural thing, but it's important to start that spreadsheet, I think, because it can get very confusing later on. You'll forget about people, and you'll forget to go back to them, and you'll forget about names they give you as well. So it's a very useful thing, very useful tool to have, particularly during a job search. Helpful phrases you can use. So I wanted to ask you, I'm curious is a brilliant way to phrase things, because it already shows, an interest in them and excitement. So if you can phrase your questions with, I'm curious to know more about X job or software development or whatever it is, that is a great way to convey genuine interest. And also is I enjoy, right? I enjoy doing this. So when it turns to you, particularly in your 3-statement message, if you can say, I enjoy doing whatever it is, your core strength, if you can slip that into your conversation, that also shows, your genuine interest in something. And Elise must have dropped off. Okay. The next 2, I'm trying to meet up with people who else should I be talking to? These are 2 really great phrases to, open yourself up to further introductions. So I definitely encourage you, as I said, try and get that question in there for further introductions. Do that with every conversation you go into when you're networking. And, at the end, it's nice just to throw in that, you've been really helpful. This has helped me in, and pull out whatever it is, great feedback they gave you, and emphasize, how much you value their time. And that's a really nice, classy way, right, to finish a conversation. So how to know that you're ready to move on from tier 1 networking? As I said, I didn't spend long here because I really wanted to get talking to people in the pharma industry. That was my main interest. I just wanted to practice how I came across and made sure that I was sounding genuine. So you'll know you're ready for tier 2 when you feel confident reaching out to people. A lot of you might already feel that you're at this stage. You'll feel comfortable about talking about your strengths, making small talk and asking insightful questions. You'll feel that you're able to deliver that 3 short statement message very clearly. You'll have it front of mind when you go into any conversation, ready to deliver it. And you may even come out of this with a few connections to start your tier 2 networking anyway, because they'll put you in touch with people you don't know. And what I want to do today is to ask you this week to reach out to at least 1 tier 1 network. So I'd like you to work through that worksheet that you've done. Try and get a 3 short statement message together if you can. I know some of you are still working on your core strengths, but try and wrap that up and fashion them. And then start this process by practicing with at least 1 tier network this week if you can. You might only have time to be able to set up, a conversation with them, but I challenge you to attempt to do that. And, I think it's an important point that I should make here, that I really feel it's important that you're not tempted to skip tier 1. I mean, you don't have to invest tons of time in it, but a bit of practice will make all the difference in how effective your networking is going to be as you progress through the next 2 tiers of the framework. So even if you just spend, a week talking to a couple, maybe 3 people who are trusted colleagues for a bit of feedback, it's going to do you no end of help in the future when you go on and you're networking with tier 2 contacts and beyond. Okay, so hopefully that was clear as to what I think tier 1 networking is and what it can do for you. Is there any questions about that at this point?
I have a question.
Yep.
If so, I actually contacted someone that did the PhD. Well, it was part of the same PhD program as me a long time ago, and he works for one of the big pharma companies. And there was a post, or he commented on some recruitment posts from his company, saying that the links were not working, right? And just the initial description of the job ad fitted what I was looking for. And then I couldn't find the job ad in the company website. So I contacted this colleague who I haven't spoken for like 10 years or more. And he was like, he replied basically the next day. And he said, yeah, I also couldn't find it. And unfortunately, so he told me like, I actually hired the imaging specialist last year for my team. And I think I missed there the opportunity to engage in the conversation of, oh, what are you doing? And, is there a way to rescue that? Because now I really feel sorry that I didn't, like, I was so focused in trying to find that ad and figuring out what was really the job about. And I kind of forgot about him, and I should have nurtured that relationship. So is there a way that I can salvage that?
Well, first off, Vanessa, you need to put him in your sheet, right? Your networking sheet, along with that CEO, so you don't forget these people. Because I absolutely think there's a way to rescue that. All you have to do is reach out. I mean, you were ex-colleagues, right? You were ex-students together on the same program. So all you have to do is reach out and say, hey, I saw, that we had that conversation about that job ages ago. I'm thinking about leaving academia or looking for a job. I don't know which pharma company it is, or if you're looking in pharma, but in biopharma or whatever, you can be as general as you want. Yeah, sorry.
He's in AstraZeneca.
Oh, in AZ. Okay. Yeah. So and just say, basically, would he be up for a conversation or chat sometime about it? And be very casual about it. You already have an inroad because you were on the same PhD program. So I don't think there's a problem trying to rescue that. And yes, your last contact was very much about, finding a job, but I think you can turn that on its head now and use the narrative that you're interested and you want to learn more about, what jobs are out there. And I think it's definitely worth a go.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try. Thanks.
Yeah. Good luck. Give it a go. I think you've got a good chance there, Vanessa, because like I said, you know him. Right, he might not be a tier 1 contact because he's not maybe a trusted friend, but he's certainly a contact in your network. He's certainly a tier 2 contact that you don't need a warm introduction for because you already know him. So definitely, I would pursue that avenue.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? If not, we'll get on to informational interviewing because we've had a few questions about that. So it's good to spend a bit of extra time on this. Okay, informational interviewing, tier 2 networking. Okay, so these tier 2 contacts, we've already kind of covered a bit who they are, but they're individuals who basically do jobs that you're potentially interested in or know about jobs that you're potentially interested in as well, okay, within the companies that they're working in. So, when we're talking about transitioning to industry, these are obviously non-academics. They are people already working in industry. And you may have an introduction from them. So they may be warm contacts. These are people who you've been introduced to from either tier 1 or other tier 2 contacts. Or you may have to reach out to them, cold via LinkedIn, which and we've discussed this, can have a lower success rate because it increases your chances of ghosting because you don't know them and you haven't been introduced. But don't let this put you off, okay? This is normal. You know, just keep pushing. You will find people who want to talk to you. I mentioned this before as well. It's helpful if it's someone you've got something common with, okay? And that can be very general, right? Maybe you studied at the same place, maybe you just both have a PhD, or you come from the same hometown or country, or maybe you share a common contact. It can be absolutely anything, okay? Just something to break the ice. And I would put that up front. Sorry, I apologize, I'm getting coffee. I would put that up front when you reach out to them on LinkedIn. I'd say, hi, I see we both lived in Canada. I would, you know, it can be anything, right? Or we both studied at Nottingham University. When I was reaching out to people, I looked at my alumni. I did my PhD at Nottingham University in the UK, and I looked at alumni who were working in different places. And that was often a really good icebreaker for them to get back to me. And I think that increased my success rate of not being ghosted by them and hearing back. So I would definitely have that up front before you then start on what you want to say. So, you know, why you want to do this is you want to reach new contacts because you want to understand more about the non-academic job market. We've discussed that. And this is really all about research, okay? Research, career research, right? This is a very, very important point because, sorry, I've got this horrible cough that's just started. What you want to be doing is, you know, getting that desired information by encouraging the interviewee to be speaking, right? So the focus needs to be on them and not you, right? That's not to say you shouldn't answer the questions when they arise, but you don't want to use it all the time talking about yourself because that's really not the objective of what you're doing. What you're doing here is trying to build that background information, as I said, to increase your credibility as a candidate. People find it easy, really easy to talk about themselves and their experiences. So try to tap into that. And remember, you know, sorry, remember that.
Vicky,
you know, yeah?
sorry to interrupt you. It's Dania. I mean, if you want, maybe you can have a kind of, I don't know, 3-minute, 5 minutes break. I see that the coughing is bothering you, no?
Yeah, it's just that I had a sip of water and it went the wrong way.
Yeah,
I do apologize.
No, I mean, it's okay. It can happen, but just, I don't know, keep it like 2-3 minutes. I guess it will be better because you are just putting pressure on your throat.
That's very kind of you, Dania, but I realize we're short on time and I want to try and answer everybody's questions. So
okay.
If you don't mind me coughing, I'll try to continue.
Not at all.
Okay, great. Let me try and push on. Okay. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
For the other sessions, Vicky.
Sorry, Harry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, I said we need you for the other sessions. So.
Yeah, I'll be fine. Don't worry. I had cold last week, so that's just a hangover from this, I'm afraid. But I'm better now anyway. So it's just this lingering cough that tends to come up every now and then. So. Yeah, where was I? So anyway, as you start to learn more from these people, you know, start to draw up a list of target organizations that they mention, you'll start to get a feel. This is what I learned when I spoke to enough people in the medical writing world. I started to get a feel for the companies that people felt the best writers worked at. Okay, and that was really important because that gave me a target set of organizations that I felt were the best for me to aim for at that time. And what it also gave me was, because I had the target organizations, I started to learn the names of people that made decisions at those target organizations, right? Who were the hiring managers, who was working in HR. I started to pick up those names shortly and I started to put them on my list, right, as tier 3 contacts. So that's a really good thing that you need to try and get out of these conversations as well. Just a few ground rules before I explain, you know, what I think you should be asking them. Sorry, I know this is more rules, but first off, it's not about job searching, okay? As I said, it's not about you at all. It's a complete research exercise. You want to keep that person talking as much as you possibly can. You're going to have a short period of time with them, maybe just 15, 20 minutes. Get as much information as quickly as you can in that time. That's the aim. If the conversation goes on longer than that, great. You know, if they want to give you an hour, take it. Perfect. But the vast majority of conversations certainly won't be more than 30 minutes. So use your 3 short statement message to get your important points across about what you bring to them, you know, and the positive messaging that you want to reinforce, but use the majority of the conversation to ask the questions that get them talking and get that information that you need. You need to make it as low pressure as possible for the interviewee. Make the conversation easy for them. People talk about themselves as, you know, they don't mind talking about themselves. They like to talk about themselves often. And they will feel, when they're talking about themselves to you, they will feel that they start to like you, right? Because, you know, and it's easy for them. It's no big asks. Getting back to this point where you're not asking them to read your resume. You're not asking them for, you know, are there any jobs? Can they refer you? That's not what we're doing at this point. We're asking for information. We're building that relationship. Okay, so make it very low pressure, no big asks. Have an up-to-date LinkedIn page ready. Lots of you will already have this. If you're starting to move your career search forward to targeting in on a specific career type, start to tailor your LinkedIn page towards that, because the first thing anybody you reach out to on LinkedIn is going to do, they're going to look at, if they're interested in talking to you, they're going to look at your profile. So make sure it's up to date. Make sure you've got all the relevant information in there. We're going to deep dive on LinkedIn next week, so don't panic too much. You know, we'll be ready for this tier 2 networking after next week's session. So you just need to make sure that you have a LinkedIn page that's up to date as much as possible. And do a little bit of homework. I think, Sue, you mentioned this, right? You said that when you're reaching out to tier 2 people, you already done some background research. Now, I'm not asking you to spend loads of time on this. You know, you're not researching like you would do for an interview, right? It's not a job interview that you need to prepare for, but it is good to go into the conversation, because the time is short and it's precious. You don't want to be clarifying things that you could just otherwise easily find on Google. Okay, so have a rough idea of the job, maybe even the career path that they're on, and what the company does, right? And this is going to give you also some great insights into how to frame the questions and get more information from them, more relevant information that you couldn't just get on a Google search. Okay, so do a little bit of homework before the interview if you can. And then last, always follow up. Okay, the legwork in networking is done in the follow-up. It's done in that relationship building afterwards. Why that Excel sheet's really, really useful, right? Not only with a thank you, but also with your progress. So, you know, I do informational interviews a lot. I try to spend as much time as I can talking to people and helping them if they're interested in career medical writing. But then it's really nice to hear back when they've got an interview, or, you know, they've contacted someone that I put them in touch with, just to hear back that, you know, the conversation went well, or when they start their first job, you know, it's really, really lovely to hear that they've made some progress. So, you know, remember that, always follow up with thank you, but, you know, keep them up to date with your progress as well. Just got something in the chat here. Oh, right, Sue, you were really on top form with this networking, because you already have a spreadsheet of all the people. That's brilliant, brilliant. So you already you know what to do in this whole process. Fantastic. Okay, so, oh, chat again. Very cool. Yes, it is. It is. Oh, Harry must have dropped off. Welcome back. Okay. So networking, informational interviews in terms of the starter script. So what you want to think about is when you're reaching out to them on LinkedIn, as I said, first up, try and have something that just sets you on common ground with them. Can be anything, as I said, you salute at the same place, whatever it is, right? Then state up front, I'm exploring career options beyond academia. Okay, now, you know, you might want to be bit more specific here. If you are literally just exploring all sorts of options, you can literally just state this, but you might specifically want to say, you know, I'm exploring options in pharma, or in, I don't know, medical affairs, whatever it is, right? Just say that point and be as specific as you want to be at that point. Also, I would say up front in the LinkedIn connection requests that, you know, would you be interested in, or would you be up for a 20-minute chat? 20 minutes is usually a good time, I think, to put up there. I often speak to people for a lot longer than that, but if people reach out and say they want a 20-minute chat, I think, well, I've got 20 minutes, it's time to have a coffee. Sure, why not? So I think that's not a time that would put people off. It is a short time to gather a lot of information, but it's a good starting point, okay? And remember, even if you can't gather all the information that you want, you can follow up with these relationships after. You can send questions offline. Once you've started that relationship, you've initiated it, you can keep building on it and keep talking to people. Also, by stating, I'm searching for people with jobs that interest me, that explains exactly why you're reaching out to them as well. When you actually get to talk to them, a great first question can be, can I ask you about your typical day at work? Because they know that you're reaching out to them with an interest about their job. Asking this is a very easy thing for them to say, what they do on a typical day. And it really, it's a great question to set up the tone of the conversation, because you're basically saying up front that you're aiming to focus the conversation on them and everything about them. So I've found that's a really useful conversation to start these questions, start these conversations. I'll just look at the chat. Thank you. Okay. When the conversation turns to you again, 3 short statement message, you'll already have it tailored based on what you got out of the tier 1 feedback. Try and get that messaging in. Okay, try and get that messaging into the conversation somewhere. Don't make it sound forced, but at least get, I managed always to get the 3 parts in, but at least try and get some of it in, right? Because you want them to remember you for those core strengths. You want them to have you at the forefront of their mind as somebody who might be, potentially bringing the right skill set to their industry or sector. And then the specific things that you want to know more about. The first 3 on this list here, company culture, competitors, and current challenges, right, in the company or sector. These are really important for crafting your job applications. And we'll look at how we can use this next week. So they're really, really 3 topics that can be very useful to gather information on. As I said, you can craft and tailor your job applications. These things, the information on these things will really make you stand out when you're applying for an industry job. And we'll look at that in detail next week. Then, hot topics in the industry. If you manage to gather information on those, they're definitely things that you can bring up in an interview, and they show that you're in the know. When I was doing these informational interviews, the top things that were coming out to me was patient-centric communications that were happening within the pharma industry. So the pharma industry was moving away from just taking opinions from healthcare professionals, and it was starting to take opinions. This was 5 years ago. It does it a lot more now, but it's starting to take opinions from patients. And it was a really new thing in the field. And when I spoke to medical writers, they were all talking about this. And they were also all talking about multi-channel communication. So communications across social media, not just printed communications in journals and conferences. So, these 2 topics kept coming up. And they're 2 topics that I was able to pull up in my interview and show that I was in the know of where the industry was going. So really be listening out for those types of things that people are bringing up, because these are the things that are going to help you stand out in your interview. You can also learn the skills that they use, right? So ask them, when you're asking them about their typical working day, ask them, what skills did you learn during your PhD or whatever they did, their background, that help you in your daily job as well. That's a great question, because they'll pull up those skills that then when you go back to your skill sheet, you can try and cross-match that and see which skills you have and that you can pull to the fore in your applications and in your interviews. And also gaps, right? Gaps of skills that they're using that you may want to, develop further and plug. Ask them how they made the transition, because that will give you a good indication of the potentially same path you can take. Any tips that they have on that as well. The recruitment process generally. When I was transitioning, I learned through informational interviews that all medical writers have to do a writing test. It was the first time I'd heard about that test, and I knew then it was part of the recruitment process, so I could start, thinking about that and trying to research what that involved. And if you've time, also ask where they're heading. What other opportunities are there for somebody in their position, and any other advice they can give you. Now, in a 20-minute conversation, you're not necessarily going to fit all this in. This is just ideas of things you can ask around And as I said, you can follow up later. Okay, you don't have to cram all this in. But these are the sort of things you want to get them talking about. This is why you don't want to be talking too much or trying to sell yourself in these conversations. It's not what this is about. This is important background information that you're going to be able to use and build a foundation on for your applications. Okay, and then this critical question, this is one that you must ask, this last point here, is there anyone in your network you think might be able to help explore this career path further? Always, always, as I said, even with the tier one tier one contacts, always try to get this question in with whoever you're talking to, because it might just give you, you know, a warm introduction to somebody else that you can talk to next. Okay, so next steps. Again, this is very similar to the tier one contacts. Follow up with a quick thank you note, highlight what you got out of the conversation, just has to be 1 or 2 points. Update your spreadsheet, okay, including any future contacts they mention, and then update them with any progress. So, you know, I mentioned this earlier, you know, if they put you in touch with somebody, say you got in contact with them. If they mentioned industry updates, see if there's an article out there, send it on to them. You know, if they mentioned any job opportunities, say, you know, I've explored those, or, you know, add value where you can and update them, keep that relationship going. Helpful phrases, obviously, you know, start by asking them how they are. And then the best thing to do with these types of conversations is reiterate how the conversation came about. If it's a warm contact, say, you know, Mr. John Doe at Google put me in touch with you and suggest that I contact you to talk about, you know, software development jobs, whatever it is. Okay, just say how that came about. It might just be, we met on LinkedIn. I said that I was interested in job. Just reiterate how the conversation came around, because it won't be forefront in their mind, and it's a good icebreaker. A good way of phrasing things when you're asking questions is to say, any insight in X, Y, and Z things you're interested in, that would be really helpful. And that just gives them the background that you want to know more about this area, and they might, you know, start waffling on and going off on a tangent on things that, you know, otherwise you haven't specifically asked about, but potentially could be very interesting. Who else should I be talking to? That's that important question that I said. Who else is out there? Thank them again for all their insights at the end. And when you follow up, you know, tell them that you appreciate them taking time from their busy schedule when we spoke last, whatever. And, you know, as I said, just keep that dialogue going during your search for a job. How do you know you're ready to move on from tier 2 networking and ready for tier 3? You'll feel, when the conversations are going and you talk to more people in that area, you'll feel confident at handling those conversations in a professional way. You'll know some of the jargon, language. You'll have heard how the industry is moving in particular ways. You'll know some of the companies. You might even know some of the companies that are hiring. And so you'll have that kind of information at the forefront of your mind. The job types, the market trends, the sector-specific language, all those things will feel a lot more comfortable. You'll be a lot more familiar with them. And you may even have the names of a few tier 3 contacts, those decision makers, ideally even with an introduction. You may not, but you may have. And if you do have, that's a sure sign that you should really be moving on to the tier 3. But try to do as much tier 2 networking as you can, because, as I said, every conversation you have is going to build your applications with more and more credibility. Okay, let's just quickly, because we're at time, I just quickly want to run through the summary of what we've touched on today. I hope you realize that now you have everything to gain from networking, and if you follow those ground rules that I stated, you have absolutely nothing to lose, really, other than, you know, a bit of time investment, but that time investment will be well spent. Oh, and maybe a few people not getting back to you, but you don't worry about that. Use your 3 short statement message to get your strengths across in a succinct and memorable way. That memorability is important. That's why we're not bombarding with people with information. We're giving them select pieces of important information. Build your effective future role, your effective future role network using a 3-tiered networking framework that I've outlined. And this will increase your visibility on the non-academic job market. The more tier 2 contacts you speak to within a particular sector that you're interested in will increase your visibility every time. And eventually you will get passed on to those tier 3 contacts as well. Tier 1 contacts help you build the confidence you need to find your authentic voice and networking style. And then tier 2 contacts teach you all about those jobs, all that background insights you need. And they, as I said, build your visibility going forward. So next time, using the core strengths that you're working on at the minute, or some of you already started to fashion, develop the 3 short statement message. That will be coming in the workbook later today. Reach out if you've time to at least one tier 1 contact. Use the practice starter script, refresh yourself. I'll send the notes out afterwards, and start building your non-academic network from there by documenting those names on a spreadsheet. As I said, names, occupations, date of last conversation, blah, 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 all those things, just to keep a track on where you're at. Sue has already started this, so she's ahead of the curve. There'll be a survey coming out again. This is really helpful for me because I can identify things that you want me to cover next time. Next time, we're going to be covering the post-academic job search. So we're going to be specifically looking at the things you need to develop: your resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, and also a strategy that you need to employ, I think, for having the most effective and efficient post-academic job search. We'll be covering all that next week. So if you've got any specific questions there, pop them in the survey. Equally, reach out to me or put them in the ITF LinkedIn group. I'll pick all that information up because I can write that into the next session next week as well. Very quickly before we head off, because I realize, now we are over time again. I do apologize. Let me just show you the video quickly. This, can you see my video?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. This book, The Success Code by John Lees. John Lees is a career coach guru. He's written all sorts of books on, writing an effective resume, all sorts of things, network. But this is his book on networking. And if you really want to deep dive more on how to be an effective networker, this is a really good read. But, obviously you've got all the tools that I've given you today, but if you really want to learn more, the Success Code is a really good read on this. If you're not already a member of the Grad Grid, which is a LinkedIn career networking group specifically focused on people who've come from an academic background, mostly their PhDs on there, but they're also people with other higher research degrees as well, I would really suggest, joining that group. It's run by Parag Mohanty. He's also a Novartis employee. There's thousands of people there who have either looking for jobs in industry and coming from academia, or who have already made that step. And that's a great way to find tier 2 contacts. People who are working in industry that are already on the Grad Grid, they've already put themselves up as somebody, who would be interested in talking to other people looking to make that transition. So that's a great way in, with both contacts on the Grad Grid, would you be interested in talking about, whatever career it is? So look for folks on there as well. It's free to sign up. So a really good tool. And that's it for today, folks. I realize, we've had a few questions along the way. We're 5 minutes over. I don't want to keep anybody longer than we need to, but if there are any burning questions at this point, I will be happy to take them.
I have just a question regarding questions. So I have a series of questions that I was thinking posting on the group, but I don't want to bomb. I don't want to monopolize it. So I don't know if I should do that or if I should just write to you personally. I mean, there are things that might be of interest to everyone. I don't know.
I think, Vanessa, you should definitely go for it because there's more than just my opinion, right? Other people, you're all at different stages in this process. Some of you will have other insights and things you've learned, right? So definitely, please, post them on there because I think that's important to get everybody's input and insights. And like you said, some of those questions might be shared by other people. They may already be wanting to ask those questions as well. So I think they could be useful for everybody. So I would encourage us to be using that group chat, more effectively. Okay. Definitely. And I will try my best to look at that over the week and answer them as best I can.
I think some things you might cover this week, but I don't know.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, I'll just point a comment. I'll just put a comment that we're going to cover that next time or the week after or whatever. Okay. And also, it's good for me, right? Because if you've got a question and I haven't got it covered in the next session, I can try and incorporate something this week. So please do. I mean, the survey is there for that as well if you want to do it there. But if you're happy to share with the group, by all means, I would encourage that. That would be great.
Okay, super. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions at this point? If not, I'm going to let you all go because obviously, you know, it's Saturday and we all deserve a rest. But it's been a great session, some fantastic questions. Really, thank you. Keep them coming. And I look forward to next week's session a lot.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Great
you.
chatting again today. Have a fantastic week.
Thank
See you next Saturday.
You.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.